Hi y'all. This video is about the deer extinction study, the real deer depopulation and extinction study. Not very many people know about it. Now there's a lot that know about the 1800s and how we almost lost all the turkeys and all the deer. But this was an actual deer depopulation study, and it was done by this he wrote a book. This is a, I don't know what year it was, less than 5 years ago probably. Let me get it real quick. uh, Copyright 2019. Okay, finally came out, and his name's David Clean, K-L-E-I-N-E. Okay, The Making of an Ecologist. It's a good read, and he's the ecologist that conducted the real deer depopulation and extinction study. And this is his biography. And he did two studies. He did one where two remote islands up there in Alaska, and one of the islands, he did two studies. One of them was on Coronado Island, and another one was on St. Matthews Island. Okay, now there's two methods of extinction for deer. Okay, one was where they're eaten by another predator, and another one, and then on that was on Coronado Island, and another one was where they were introduced on an island that had no deer on it at all, and they both all of them died on both islands. Two separate studies. And the one on Coronado Island was there was a whole bunch of deer on that island, and what he did on that island was he introduced a wolf pack. And these islands were separated from the mainland by miles of ocean waters. Okay, so there's no way that the animals could get to the island. And what he did on Coronado Island was he introduced a pack of wolves. I can't remember exactly how many it was, but it was less than 10. Two females, two males, and some cubs. Not exactly sure how. I don't remember. I took notes, of course, but I'm just talking off the top of my head. But so he introduced a bunch of wolves on the island, and there was an abundance of deer, a sustainable ecosystem with the deer on a remote island. So the wolves were artificially introduced on the island, and the wolves multiplied, and of course the deer population dropped. And I think it was like a 5 year study, something like that, plus maybe 5 to 7 year study. So the wolf population just went through the roof, and the deer population was dropping. And eventually what happened was, I think all this took about 5 years, a 5 year study. And eventually what happened was the wolves ate all the deer. And then eventually the wolves, because they're meat eaters, they started eating themselves. The wolves turned into cannibals because there wasn't any meat on the island, any more deer. So eventually everything died. The deer died, they all disappeared, and the wolves pretty much all died also. It's an interesting study, interesting read. Now the other, that's for the meat eaters. And the other study was on St. Matthews Island, and that was a bigger island. And St. Matthews had a lot of lichens from the ocean because it's pretty moist over there, so a lot of stuff was growing on the rocks. It was a remote island of at least 100 miles or so from the mainland, so no animals could get there. And that study was a 60-year study. I think it started in 1945, before during the war. The military had dropped off a bunch of deer on that island, about like 20 deer or so, something like that, so that if the war continued on and the ships got stranded on that island, they'd have a meat source. So the war ended in 45, World War II. And so it was a 60-year study or longer. And what happened was, there was like 20 or so deer that were put on that island, and they multiplied to over 6,000 deer eating all the vegetation. And that was back in the 60s, when it multiplied all the way up to like over 6,000 deer. And then what happened mysteriously, I think it was 64. Anyways, there was no more food to eat, and pretty much all the deer disappeared at the same time. They all died because they were all going for the same food source. And they went back, I don't remember the years, it was a few months since I read this book, but they went back and they did a study to see how many deer were left, and there was less than 20 deer left, and they were all females except for one male, and that male, his reproductive system wasn't any good because there just wasn't enough nutrients in the soil to sustain a good reproductive system. So eventually all those deer died too. So two different studies, one vegetarian type and another was putting the deer on a prey for predator going after the deer. The interesting study with the predator is not only did they take all their food from the island, but they also killed themselves. They started eating themselves, turning into cannibal. The wolves turned into cannibalism. And the other study was vegetarian study, and the deer ate up all their environment, and they also perished. So it's a very interesting study. It's a good read. I didn't read the whole book. I just read the part on the deer depopulation studies, because not many people know about it. They know about how the deer got overhunted by the settlers when they were going out to the west, and the turkeys almost disappeared also. But this is the real study if you want to read about it. And what does it have to do with ecology, with us as preppers? If you're on a remote location and you hunt everything in that environment, well, there ain't gonna be nothing left to eat. Okay, you see that? If you take everything out of this environment around here, anything that moves, eventually you're gonna run out of food. So you've got to know how to grow food. And that's what I keep stressing most on pretty much all these videos, is growing food. Because when you grow food, you're creating an artificial environment in an area to grow food to sustain yourself. Okay? And good read if you're interested in that. There's more to prepping than just stacking food and growing food. You've got to understand how the environment works. Okay? See y'all later.